Good morning, and a good Chodesh. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, beginning with Hilchos Shgogois, final chapter, Perek Tezvav, and starting Hilchos Mechusrei Kapara, Prakim Aleph and Beis. Starting first with Hilchos Shgogois, Perek Tezvav. We are now going to be learning about the final Karban Chatos that the Rambam did not yet discuss, which is the Chatos, like anyone else who violates any lav that there is b'mezid kares, for which you have to bring a chatos kavua, but the commoner brings the chatos kavua either from a kizba or a seira, that means from a female lamb or goat within their first year. The Torah explicitly specifies that both the Kohen Moshiach, which means the Kohen Gadol, that became the Kohen Gadol, because he was anointed with the anointing oil. And as we learned so many times together, thank God, that towards the end of Zman Bayis Rishon, King Yoshio, approximately 35 years before the first temple was destroyed by the Nebuchadnezzar, hid the anointing oil with the Aron HaKodesh and other holy kalim. From then on, a Kohen Gadol who was inaugurated to be the Kohen Gadol did so simply by wearing the Shmoina Begadim. So the dinim that we are learning now does not apply to the Kohen Gadol that's wearing the Shmoina Begadim, but only to the Kohen Gadol that was anointed with the anointing oil, that the Torah specifies that there is a unique halacha regarding his Karban Chatos, as well as the Torah mentions Asher Nasi Yechta, that if the Nasi, in this context it means a Jewish king who sins, same type of sin for which a commoner would bring the kizba or seira, there is a unique halacha regarding the nasi. Now the Rambam is going to, in this chapter, unpackage with tremendous detail huge differences between the rules regarding the Kohen Moshiach, and also we will learn all the detailed rules regarding the nasi. Perek Tezvav has 10 halachas, and we're going to be messiahing with this Hilchos Shgogois, starting with halacha Aleph, Zok the Rambam. Kfar bi'arnu, we already learned that shekol shegaga shahahedyet mevi olel chatosei hakavua, and that has to be from the female lamb or the female goat within their first year. Kisboi seiram. So im shagag bahanasi, if the nasi, as we'll define in halacha vav in this chapter, is the one that committed that inadvertent transgression, he will bring a male lamb, nasi, a soy. And the im shagag b'kohen hamoshiach, as we'll describe right now in tremendous detail, in certain circumstances, that he'll bring a pod, a bull. And again, we're speaking not about the Kohen Gadol, we're speaking only about the Kohen Gadol that becomes the Kohen Gadol because he was anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. Now, we're going to get back to the Nasi soon. Nasi is very similar to the commoner. Difference will only be the type of animal that he brings for the Karban Chatos. The Kohen Moshiach's obligation to bring a Karban is very different than a commoner. So, Moshiach may be Karban al Shigi Gasai. Now, here we're going to make a perfect correlation with the Chatos of the Kohen Moshiach to the dinim that we learned about yesterday in all 3 chapters, to the Par Helem Davar Shal Tzibur, which has to be brought when Aleph there was a erroneous ruling, and B, someone, the Roiv of the Tzibur, actually did the action based on the ruling. These 2 steps, the only time that the Kohen Mashiach has to bring a Karban Chatos for his shoygeg is if you had both of these steps, which is Kishatah Bohiras Atzmai, that he, the Kohen Mashiach, was a big scholar, as we'll see. He qualifies to be a member of the Sanhedrin. And he gave a erroneous ruling. And then, not only did he give a ruling, but he relied on his ruling, and only his ruling, as we'll define in more details in a moment. And because of that, he did whatever it is that he did. In other words, you have to have, again, these 2 steps. It has to be a hoira'ah that was a mistake, and then shigigas maisa. Who, furthermore, let's further define The concept of him giving a erroneous ruling is only if he's qualified to give rulings. Shia chacham muflam, only if he is a great scholar. Shneimar, as it says, im hakoyin hamashiach yechta la'ashmas ha'am. Now, why are we speaking about la'ashmas ha'am? Tell us, Chazal, Harei Mashiach has to follow the same rules as the tzibur. We're speaking about the par helam davar shel tzibur. Ma had tzibur she'ein bezdin, ein chayavim b'karban ad she'yu chachamim ro'im lohiram. And as we learned yesterday, if even only one member of the Sanhedrin was not the roi to be there, then the whole halacha doesn't apply. And the yitu b'hoira'ah, which is step number one, they give an erroneous halachic ruling. And number two, v'yasu ha'osim al piyam. I know ha'osim there means the majority, either in number or in tribes. V'yoiru al piyam, v'yoiru levatal mitzas, ulakay mitzas, with all the other details. It has to be a ruling that doesn't uproot an entire mitzvah. It has to be a ruling that's not against something that even the tzedukam are moedim. In other words, it's a ruling that only in a detail made a mistake. Kach HaMoshiach, only b'chol hadrachim ha'elu do we say that then you have this unique din that he brings a bull for his atonement. And let's further unfold this. He was a big chacham. And there was a question. And he gave a wrong psak. The demon, he thought, as we learned yesterday, the Rambam holds that's a befedish source in the Torah. That is Isra of Hitzah. But from that pasuk, you would only think that it's also like when they carried the manna. You are yourself walking from one domain to the other with something. But if you remain in your domain, you only throw the item, which undergoes a akira and a hanacha, but you did not go with it. He thought that's permissible. And because of his wrong conclusion, and then he actually threw something on Shabbos. Here's where we say that when he discovers that he made a wrong psak and therefore he did something wrong, yavi par lechatos. Aval, however, it wasn't that he made a mistake. El shagag v'zarek b'shgaga. For example, the Kohen Moshiach thought today is Sunday, and because of that, he did an act of transferring. Or he relied on his wrong psak, but he wasn't a chacham mufla. Or he came to a conclusion that there's no issur eating chaylev at all. Even though he came to a wrong ruling regarding a detail of a lav, but but when he did the shoygeg, he didn't do it because he relied on his psak. All right. In other words, he made a mistake. Let's go back to the examples we learned yesterday, and he thought that chaylev of keva is mutter. He took a paskin that way. Someone brought to him chaylev of a keva, but he thought it's shuman. He ate it, even if he would have known that it's chaylev of keva, he also would have eaten it. But he didn't even know. In other words, his shoygig was not because of his psak din. That means when he gave the wrong psak din, he knew that his reasonings are not good. He still came to the same psak, but he already knew that the svaris are wrong. But then the shagag b'maisam, in other words, while he did the act, then he thought his reasonings were okay. But during the psak, he knew it's wrong. All of the above cases, and he's a pater b'karban klal. He b'chlal doesn't bring a carbon. Shedinoi lohiroas atzmai has to be exactly following on the same track, kedin hakol lohiroas based on the chol, which is really amazing. Now I want to add another nuance. So what did the Rambam say? That if it doesn't follow all of the nuance details, then what? He b'chlal doesn't bring a carbon. So we're going to see something quite awesome. That a Kohen Moshiach many times will commit an act, the normal shoygig. He didn't know it was Shabbos. And he did an act of Chilul Shabbos. He b'chlal won't be chayiv a carbon. Maybe the rationale is that since the Kohen is spending his life bringing atonement for others, Hashem atones him in most cases easier than others. Like in here, he b'chlal doesn't have to bring a carbon. Now, if he gave such a psak for himself, But the shachach me'eza tamoira, and he forgot what was his rationale. That is considered the Kohen Moshiach's chait for which he brings a par. Maybe par chatosoy halacha gimel. Now let's take this to the topic that we have in Parsha Shlach Lecha. Same concept, but regarding a detail, like he thought that hishtachava only means pishut yadayim v'raglayim. And really, even kneeling is also mamish, a bona fide act of, God forbid, of idol worship. Maybe here, it's not that he's scot-free, but since this is in the Parsha of Shlach Lecha, the Parsha of Shlach, the Torah doesn't differentiate between a Kohen Mashiach and a commoner. So there he follows everyone else's halacha, moededik. But even over there, when does he bring a se'ira kehediyet and not the soid? Sheyishgoik b'ha'ira'ah. Only if again he, like the se'ira avodah zarah by the Sanhedrin, there were two steps. The two steps are a wrong psak din and then a shigegas ma'aseh she'ein ha'moshiach chayiv korban. Because the Kohen Mashiach, even when we don't give the unique din of apar, because in Parsha Shlach, like we mentioned, the Torah doesn't speak about something unique for the Kohen Mashiach. But as a rule, a Mashiach will never bring a korban for a sin, elo, if you had these two steps, which is behelam david b'hoira'ah, when he's qualified, im shigagas ha'maaseh katzibur. But avolim shagag b'maaseh bilvad v'lo hoira'ah, beim avodah zarah, beim b'shar mitzvahs, einoi, maybe korban klal, and God atones for him. But he doesn't have to bring a korban. Halacha dalet. Hoira kohen Mashiach. In Beis Din, if together with the Beis Din they made this erroneous ruling, b'shagag hu v'heim, and therefore they both actually, practice what they preached. But hoyil v'loy samach b'shas ma'aseh, on only his wrong conclusion. Because together with the Miyad Sanhedrin, El Al Hira Asa Imayrois Bezdin, here also there is a potter. And again, whenever he's pottered, this is called a Shigegas Maisa without a Shigegas Hira'ah. And like we are mentioning, that is a unique din by the Kohen Mashiach that God atones for him. And therefore, since it's not included in the din of the par, at all. Now, Elim Hoyu Bezdin B'Diyan Karbin. In other words, if Roiv HaKol committed this sin, so then we can say that he's included in the Roiv HaKol. But if only a minority of the community did that sin, and therefore, as we learned yesterday, when it's not the Roiv, not the Roiv Minyan, not the Roiv Binyan, every individual has to bring their chatos. He is a Kohen Mashiach, as we just established. A Kohen Mashiach for only Shigegas Maisa never brings a korban. Now, halacha hey, hoida in Beis Din b'shgagam. However, they were both, while there was convening in the Sanhedrin, they were both discussing different halachas. The Sanhedrin gave a erroneous ruling, something regarding a detail of dam. He, the Kohen Gadol, was the only one in the Sanhedrin focusing and coming to a wrong psak regarding chelev. In other words, we don't say that since they were discussing it while they were sitting together. No, now he was the only one discussing chelev. So here you do have the Shigegas Hira'ah, and if then he seeing that type of chelev based on his psak went and ate it, that he'll bring the par Kohen Mashiach, the par halacha vov Kohen Mashiach shenestapel kolim shagag shkagazu im Shigegas Hira'ah im amaisa. If there's a doubt whether he violated, unlike a commoner, that when there's a doubt whether they violated the sin for which you have to bring a korban chatas, in many circumstances they have the obligation of bringing during the time of doubt. Lo yadaloi, a asham taloi. However, the Kohen Mashiach ain't maybe asham taloi. Why? The pnei shehu ba katzibur. As we learned yesterday, that the tzibur also never brings an asham. Al loy hoida. Al Shigegas Hira'ah. At Khan, the unique, the very limited area where the Kohen HaMashiach indeed brings another type of carbon chatos. Aval Hanasi, right? The Torah stam, the Torah speaks the Seder about Kohen Mashiach, and then the Torah in Vayikra speaks about Asher Nasi Yechta. So here the Rambam is following here that Seder. But when it comes to the Nasi, im nestapik leim chotem leichata, yes, maybe Asham Tolik Kashara had yoitos. All of what we said is only regarding the Kohen HaMashiach. In other words, when a Nasi sins, it means he sins like any other Yid. All what happened was a Shigigas Maisa. Elamah, the Torah says, and instead of him being like a Hedyan, bringing a Kizba or a Seira, the Nasi only has the option of bringing, he's mechoyev to bring a he-goat, a so'ir. Now, what's the definition of a Nasi? Ezeo Nasi Omer B'Torah. In Achmuk, we spoke out yesterday, that the Rambam called the head of the Sanhedrin the Rosh HaYeshiva. In other areas, the head of the Sanhedrin is called the Nasi. Now I chap. So I asked why. Maybe that's the answer. Because since we're going through all of the different types of korbanos, and the Torah uses the Nasi, not for the head of the Sanhedrin, not to get confused, that Rambam gives it another name. Now, what's a Nasi in this context? A king. What's a king? It's a melech she'ein olav reshus la'adam b'Yisrael, that no one has any sovereignty over him. In other words, the only power over this person is God himself. Now, the point we're trying to make is that it's possible that the Jewish people can have at the same time various kings. We're only going to have one king from Malchus Beis David. But a Yid that is in such a position of power that he's not answerable to any human being, that's the Pshat HaNasi. Bein Shoyim Beis David, Oy Misha'ar Shifte Yisrael. Furthermore, but one is not subservient to the other. Then call echad v'yachad mehem. Maybe Yisrael al shugagosoi. And ve'ezu kohen HaMoshiach, here the Rambam is going to specify what we spoke of before. It's a kohen gadol shenimshach b'shaman hamishcha, and not the kohen gadol that is hameruba begodim. Halach is zayin. Kohen gadol shenimshach b'shaman hamishcha. And v'ovar ma'avidosoi, and he was demoted either because he had a blemish, bodily blemish, or because he got very old. And after he was demoted, in other words, a chet, for which, had he been in his throne of a Kohen Gadol, Kohen Mashiach, there was a Shigigas Hayrah and a Shigigas Maisa. All the previous preconditions were met. Just because he was demoted, it doesn't change this obligation of them bringing a pod and not the normal Kizba Seira. Why? Whether you are right now doing your avodah, whether you were demoted, the only difference will be Pad Yoim HaKippurim, that is only brought by the Kohen, that's Mishamesh, and the daily Asiris Ha'efa Shokol Yoim, which is also known as Chavite Kohen Gadol. But when it comes to this unique halacha, abol par habal kol mitzvahs, shavim hein boy. So what's really amazing is just like the Rambam just established, that Asher Nasi Yechta, it's shayach to have at the same time various kings. It's possible for these dinim to have at the same time various kohen gadol. Halacha ches. Nasi sha'asa im. I'm sorry. Yes. Nasi sha'asa. A nasi that did something b'shoigig. Im atzibur. In other words, whenever the Sanhedrin has to bring the par helam davar, he will be included in that. In other words, because Rav Hatzibur sinned, so kol ha'am ve'hamelech beturim in carbon, as we learned in all of the 3 chapters that we learned yesterday. Why is that? Because there was only a minority of the tzibur. So then he's like anyone else. Everyone else brings a kizba or seira. The Torah says that what? Asher nasi yachta, the difference is he has to bring a male goat. Hareze maybe so. Shesoid nasi is always b'makom kizba or seira shall have yetchu oimed. Halacha tes. Now, Atkan, what we learned about the Kohen Gadol, that was demoted because of a mum, or because if he got too old to do the avodah. Let's go now to a nasi. What happens if you have a king? A king, shenet tzara, and you should know that whenever a king has tzaras, he is permanently demoted from ever returning to the throne. So now, first of all, Navi shenet tzara, avar minisiyusay. He has to be removed from office. The nasi, she'avar minisiyusay, he, unlike the Kohen Gadol, that remains a Kohen Gadol, not so the king. He becomes a commoner, and now if he does something b'shogeg, he has to bring a kizba or a seira. And now the question will be, what happens if the sin and the time that he brings the carbon is where he's in a different status? So Kata, when he was a nasi, that's when he did the action. And now he got demoted. Let's say he became a mitzvah. Now he wants to bring the carbon. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at the time of him coming to the holy temple? Or are we looking at the time of the sin? Paskins the Rambam, we are looking at the time of the sin. Maybe soil. Which means who maybe. In the final, halacha yud says the Rambam like this: Kohen Moshiach, oy melech, shachatu acheloi nismanu. Here they sinned prior to them being appointed. And again, we just said at the end of halacha tes that it's kishas chatasei. We'll be consistent. Harei look ahead. Or im hakoyin Mashiach yechta. And when they sinned, they weren't yet the nasi. He wasn't yet the koyin Mashiach. And therefore, im achol safik chelik shuhedet. And we said that what? That a koyin Mashiach doesn't bring in asham talui. But again, the action was done prior to him being appointed. Even if after he was appointed as a kohen gadol with being anointed, since it's all about the time of the sin, then he was a commoner. Yes, you'll have a kohen gadol bringing an asham talui. Ochal chatzi zayis chaylev when he was a hedyot, and another chatzi zayis kishul nasi behelam echad. So now gavaldik. So now he ate a kazayis. The problem is, when think about it, even though he began eating it when he was a hedyot, but when did he do the act for which you have to bring a carbon? When he became already kohen Mashiach, or the same thing with a nasi. I take it back. Wow, Chlal doesn't combine, and therefore a pater. Chlal doesn't combine. However, listen to this case. And then he was appointed. And he was demoted. And then he ate another chatzi zayis when he was a hedyot. In other words, he ate both chatzi zayis when he had the same status. But there was a time in the interim in which had he eaten it, then it would not have combined. So here, there's a suffix in mitzvah, or kfariv sika hanasius. And just to speak out, the Rambam already told us so many times that any time that you're going to be chayiv or carbon chatas, if there's a suffix, if the chatas is from an animal, and the Rambam holds, even if it's from a bird, if it's not lekapara, right, if it's not going to hold back your permissibility to eat kachem, then you're not allowed to bring it. And indeed, here, since there's a doubt, therefore you do not bring the chatas. And with that, we say, B'rich Rachmana D'Sayim, we bless Hashem for offering us the siyua that we need for the past, and we ask God for the future that we should be able to be matzliach here. We are continuing with today's second chapter, starting Hilchos Mechusrei Kapara. Finally, we mentioned so many times about the Mechusrei Kapara, just to make it clear that the Mechusrei Kapara is someone, as we'll see, there are four peoples that can fall into the category of Mechusrei Kapara. All of them have Tumah. All of them had most of their Tumah removed, but they're not enough tahar to be able to eat kachem. And once they reach the level that all they need to do is to bring certain karbanos, which will then allow them to eat kachem, they are then in the category of mechusrei kapara. Just to speak out that the four types of mechusrei kapara, I'm going to follow the seder of the Rambam, is a zava. Now we already learned extensively about the nida and the zava. So we're speaking about a woman who sees a flow, not during the 7 days of Nidus, but dafka during the 11 days of Zivus. We're also not speaking about a Zava Kitana, who's only Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom. Even if she sees for 2 days, she only has to keep 1 day. Point there is that after she keeps that one clean day and she goes to the mikvah during the day, if she doesn't see until the end of the day, she's completely tohaira. There's no need for karbanis. Where dafka is speaking about a Zava Gedoyla. So a Zava Gedoyla, it's not only that she has to keep 7 clean days, but more than that, on the 8th day, she has to bring karbanos. Now a Zava, unlike the Yoledis, we don't care whether she's wealthy or poor. The karbanos of a Zava Gedoyla are always 2 birds, as we'll see in this chapter. So that's the Zava. Then you have a Yoledis that we already spoke a little bit about. The Rambam is going to add more details by a Yoledis, as we'll see, after a male on day 41, not day 40, because she has to wait for the week of Dam, which she's Tameh regardless. Then you have the Dam Toyar. After a male, it's 33 days after the week. By a girl, everything is double. She's Tameh for 2 weeks, and then she has Dam Toyar for 66 days. Point is, it ends on day 80. The day after, day 41 after a Zachar, day 81 after an Akeva, that's the day in which, from that day on, a woman has to bring the karbanos. Now, we already learned, if she/husband are wealthy, 1 animal, 1 bird. If she cannot afford the animal, she brings 2 birds. Only after these karbanos is she allowed to eat kachim. The third case will be a Zav, and today's second chapter, Pedig Beis, will go through all of the details of a Zav. So you can also have a Zav, like we had by the Zava, that is Tameh as a Zav, that will actually need the Shivas Nekiyim like a Zav, that would have to go to Mayim Chayim. A mikvah won't be enough like a Zav, but he will not need to bring karbanos. The karbanos, the mechusrik, the kapara of a Zav, is only if he had 3 de'iyos. Again, we're going to leave the details of that to the next chapter. And the final category is the mitzvah, a normal mitzvah. After the Samani mitzvah left, and he undergoes the first shaving, and then the 7 clean days, and then the second shaving. On the 8th day, very much like the Zava Gedoyla on her 8th day, he's tahar, but he cannot eat kachin. These are going to be the 4 categories that will be discussed, at least in the basics, in the first chapter. But prior to that, let's go through the koiseres. So the Rambam writes, Yesh b'chlolon arba mitzvahs aseh v'zeu pratan aleph shetakriv hazava kishetitar. And again, we're speaking about on the 8th day. Even though, if you remember, the Zava Gedoyla, like a Zava Katana, she goes to the mikvah on the 7th day. She goes to the mikvah on the Shemeres Yom. And if theoretically she won't see a Re'iyah that day, then if she had a relation with her husband, which she shouldn't, post facto, she did not commit a sin. Right? The only woman that goes to the mikveh at night is a nida. What's unique today is that today the Amar Abzeda, but even before the Amar Abzeda, that first we put together the chumras of a nida and the chumras of a zava, which is why today you have Shivas Nekiyim and you only go to the mikveh at night. We're speaking about the day after. That's the halacha. Kishatita means on the 8th day she brings a carbon. Number 2 is, so the Rambam begins with the Zava. That's the Seder throughout. Number 2 is Shetakriv Hayoledes. But when only Kishatita. Now, not Kishatita during the Dam Toyer days. No, as we'll see clear. It's only after all of that unique period of time passes and the Torah explicitly differentiates between a Zachar and an Akeva. Then she brings day 41 or later after a Zachar. Day 81 or later after an Akeva. Halacha Gimel. Kishiyakriv Hazov. Now it's a Zov that had 3 de'iyos, and that will leave completely for a Pedig Beis. After means again on the 8th day, not on the 7th day. And on the 7th day, the Zov goes to Mayim Chai. But you have to wait until the next. You have to go to the mikvah, wait until head of Shemesh, then bring karbanis. You cannot bring karbanis at night. So it's the next day. On the 8th day, Kishiyitar Karban, and then the final Dalid Shiyakriv Mitzayda. Also on the 8th day, Kishiyitar Karban. And carbon doesn't mean 1. We'll see many times carbon is referring to various. By the Mitzvah God, it's 3. But they all have in common is that even though they're pure after going to the mikvah, on top of that, they wait until head of Shemesh. Right? So let's say to eat Maisa Sheni, mikvah is enough. Remember? To eat Truma, for that you have to wait until head of Shemesh. To eat Kachim, in these 4 cases, there's still a vestige, there's an epis, a Truma on that person, and they have to wait until they bring the. So that kapara, it's interesting. It's about kapara, but it's about kahara, and we're gonna have that clear. After they bring their karbanos, then their purity is complete. What's that purity? We're going to see, let's say, by the Mitzoida. By the Mitzoida, after he brings the chatos, he can eat kacham. Or maybe after he brings the asham. Well, I forgot that detail. Point is that even when he still is mechuyev to bring karbanos for kapara, once he's completely tahar, he's allowed to eat kachim. Now, beer, mitzvahs elu beprakim elu. Perek Aleph has 13 halachas, and let's start with halach Aleph. Arba'a hein hanikroyim mechusrei kapara. Hazava v'hayoledes v'hazav v'hametzoyim. Rambam goes on, v'lama nikru mechusrei kapara. The answer is, shekol echad mihem, af al pi shetohar mitumasai. Now, Torah mitumasai, the Rambam is using these words even prior to the mikvah. I'll give you an example. The Mitzayim, the Simonim left, or the woman, the Zava. Let's go to the first one. She doesn't have any more dam. Not only that, she counted 7 clean days. In other words, that tumor left, and she went to the mikvah. And for many, like for eating chulin, for even eating ma'aser sheni, what did we learn? You don't have to wait until head of shemesh. That would be enough. And on top of that, once you go into things that are even holier, like for truma, the head of shimshoi. Still, adayinu chaser, look into these words, not chaser in kapara, chaser in tahara. V'loi gomra taharasoi, kedei lechol bakachim, ache yavin korbanoi. Appreciate this way of framing it. Again, even though we call it the chaser kapara, it's about the tahara. And v'koidim sheyavin kaparasoi, also lechol bakachim. As we learned in Psuli HaMikdash and Perek Yud Ches. I want to add a little nuance over here. Regarding the suffix, whenever there's a suffix, we learned the unique din, even though we just concluded the previous series of shkogas by mentioning that the Rambam said many times that any chatos is only brought when you know you're chayv. If you have a suffix by an animal, you're not allowed to bring it. We mentioned a bird is different. Bird chatos is a special limo that you can bring it even a suffix, even though you're not allowed to eat it. But at least you can bring it on the mizbeach. And why can you do it? Because of this. Because if you need for your tahara, a bird, karban chatas, and if you're going to have a suffix by kacham, will be machmer. You can't eat kacham until you bring that karban. So that's why we were mated for you to bring a suffix bird chatas. Let's continue Allah habits. Now the Rambam is really addressing a question. Isn't there a fifth case? And there is externally a fifth case. But why are we speaking about 4 cases? You know who will be the fifth case? Someone who converts during the times that we have a mizbeach, as we learned, have to bring, as we'll see, karban nois, either an animal or 2 birds. Prior to bringing the karbanos, they're not allowed to eat kachim. So why don't we include a ger? A ger is not allowed to eat kachim until he brings his karbanos. Halacha beis, ger shemal and v'taval, but if when there is a temple, when there is a mizbeach, and the din is he's not allowed to eat kachim yet. But we don't include the ger in the category of mechusrei kapara. Why? Rambam says, I'll tell you why. Because a convert during the times of a mizbeach who doesn't bring a karban is not yet a bona fide Jew. It's not pshat that he's a yid. Elamah, he became tamei. He has to remove his complete tumah. Or he needs kapara. No, he's not a yid yet. That's pshat. So you can't call him a mechusrei kapara. He's not Jewish yet. Not fully Jewish yet. And we already mentioned that when we don't yet have a mizbeach, he does become a bona fide Jew through the steps that we can do nowadays. We're speaking about this man that we have a mizbeach. And that's why he doesn't eat kachim. Then he can eat kachim, not because now he became pure, because now he became Jewish. That's why, even though externally it sounds like it's the same, we never include the ger in this category, in the 4. 4 again is zava, yoledes, zav, and mitzvah. Now, another detail. If you remember, what carbon does a ger have to bring? He has to bring either a animal or 2 birds. Now, what happens if the option of the birds is his option, but he only brought one of the 2? He didn't yet bring the second bird, says the Rambam, he can eat kacham lo erev. In other words, even though he's going to be chayiv to bring the other bird, even one of the two birds will already make him a Yisrael Gamur. Now, why does the Rambam write La'erev, Danny, you remember? Why does he write La'erev? Why doesn't he write, if you bring one Preda, you're good. You understand? And you'll be chayiv to bring the Yavi Preda Shniya. So if you remember, guys, a ger, Shenes Gayir is like someone who just left a cave. You remember, we just learned this by Hilchos Pesach. It's a person who converts midrabanan has to undergo 7 clean days. They have to have the azah of the 3rd day and of the 7th day. They have to have erev shemesh. So that's the meaning of la'erev. La'erev doesn't just mean la'erev. La'erev means a guy a ger who converts, and he only brought one of the 2 birds, and he did everything it means. And now, like any other convert, he has a din like someone who just went away from a tumas mace. So he underwent the 7th, and he waited until Erev Shemesh. Now he's okay. And when he's chayiv to bring the 2nd bird, but he doesn't have to bring it in order to eat kachim. Shekarbani shall get as either oil bebehema. Okay, here you don't have an option to give a half an oil. Oy shnei b'nei yoino, oy shnei toirim, and both of them are an oila, as we learned in Maisa Karbanos, and therefore we say that since you brought the oila, even though you're still chayiv to bring the other bird, for this you already are a ger gamur, a Yisrael gamur. Halacha gimel. Now, hazava, not the yoledis, like we mentioned, not the mitzvah that we mentioned, that they are in Hilchos Shgogas, that they have upsaza oil b'yored, right? Not so by Yazav and Azav. For them, it's always the same. Karbonai kol echad mehem shtei toirim or shnei b'nei yoyim. Always wealthy, poor. Echad la'oila ve'echad chatus. However, how you led this, here it depends. Her cardamom is, if she's wealthier, then the oila has to be an animal. One animal, a male lamb. And then the bird, either ben yoino or one toir l'chatus. But the imen yoda masekes, then maybe a shtei toir or shnei b'nei yoino. Echad oila ve'echad chatus. Hametzoira, the karbanos of a metzoira is really 3. Karbanos shloisha kavasim. If he's wealthy, he brings 3 male lambs. Echad oila. I'm sorry. I said male, only 2 males. 1 oila and 1 asham. And then, like any other commoner that only brings a female animal, lachatas v'kizba lachatas. But here we have oila v'yored. The imen yoda masekes maybe came. Echad oila v'echad chatas. However, even the poor mitzvah must always bring, as we keep on mentioning, an animal la'asham, because we'll see we have to do the avoid of dam and the whole unique way you're makabel the dam, as we'll learn soon regarding the mitzvah. Halacha dam. Now, hazav v'hazava v'hamitzvah. Who are we not speaking about? The yoledis. Maybe kol echad mishplashtan kaparasai v'yoyim hashmini l'tarasai. They share this common rule. Shkol echad mehem has to have the counting of the 7 clean days l'tara, and you go to the mikvah on the 7th day. And b'chlal, even not only for kachim, like we mentioned, even only for truma, you have to wait until it's dark, and then you have to bring karbanis. Now hold on. You know, it's theoretically, if you would be allowed to bring karbanis at night, you would bring it the night, but you can't. So you can only bring it on the 8th day. However, now we're going to spend a lot of time learning about the yoledis. And Chaver Mashiach is coming. We got to know this. We young people, we're having babies. Look at this whole part that we have to know how to keep karbanis. How you led this? Eino mevia karbano. On the 40th day, lazachar. Just like the 3 that we mentioned above, they don't bring it on the 7th day; they bring it on the 8th day. And I was trying to emphasize that. So again, you give birth to a boy, Yaron. The rule is the woman is tamei 7 days, even if she didn't see dam. A woman gives birth to a girl; she's tameya for 2 weeks. Then you add after a boy 33 days, in which even if she's flowing blood from her womb, it does not make her tummy by Torah law. By a girl for the next 66 days after the 14th, even if there's dam, it's called dam toyhar. Yeah, this is by Torah law. We were machmer on that. And that whole unique halachis ends day 40 after a boy, day 80 after a girl. The next day is when they bring this carbon, these carbon noise of labor. So it's not on the 40th, not on the 80th Lemekeva. Ella Mareva Shimsh. She waits until it's dark. And when is that? And that's the day that the Torah is referring to in Parshas Tazria, u'b'melo'os. This word b'melo'os is very important. That means when you complete what we call Yimei Tahara. Yimei Tahara means when you see Dam, it's Dam Toyad. When it's completed doesn't mean in the middle of the last day. It means you exited those days. And even if post facto she brought it, even if it was on the 40th day, avadi even earlier. Lo yatzas. Ella afilu hivia alvolodis rishonim shoy betechim leishavod zeh. Ella yatzas. Another detail. Now let me just say this by heart, guys. That will be a big part of this chapter. What happens if a woman gives birth to twins? Do you know the din? Does she have to bring double karbanis? Remember? Answer is no. I'll tell you the rule is like this. When a woman is within her days of Malois, let's say a woman gave birth to a girl, it's more shaykh. So she has 80 days. She has 80 days for this period to exit. It's shaykh during those 80 days for her to get pregnant, and for her to be pregnant for 40 complete days, which means that even if, God forbid, she has a miscarriage, that fetus will give her a new din of tumas yoledis, and it's theoretically would have been machayev for her to bring karbanos. But it won't be machayev for her to bring karbanos, because since she had it within the 80 days, whether it's twins at the same time or anything that happened within those 80 days, the one set of karbanos at the end will exempt everything. But if, let's say, a woman gave birth to an aked or to a zachar, and those days left, but she didn't go to the Beis Hamikdash, she didn't bring their karbanos, and afterwards she got pregnant, and either she had a miscarriage or she had a baby, now she's chayav to bring two sets. So the Rambam is writing that if she's bringing for the first birth during the milois of the second, also not going to be good. You can never bring the karbanos during the days of milois, even if you're bringing karbanos for a prior birth. You understand? Since you are in a new days of milois, you cannot bring karbanos. Now, avru yamim elo v'loiviu kaporasim. It's not that you have to bring it on day 41 or on day 81, and if not, you're lost. No. Then you're chayiv until when you bring it. Has a chayim. You cannot eat kosher. Hari elo meviim kaporasim la'achazman. And v'chol zman shelo yikrivu chatasan, and underline the word chatasan, because we just mentioned that she brings a oila and a chatos. Whether it's an animal or a bird, I don't care. Point is that which one of these two is the one that's really ma'akev the chatos. Asurim le'echol bekachim, avol ha'oila, and by the mitzvah, noch there are three karbanos. Chatos, oila, and asham. So the oila and the asham are not ma'akev. Just to make that clear. Now, kvar b'yanu b'maisa karbanis, perik yud dalid, shekol lechuyvei karben, ein makriven al yodan elamidato. That normally, let's say, if you do even on a chatos, I cannot bring a carbon on your behalf without your knowledge. However, what's the exception? You don't even have to have their knowledge. What's the raya? And after karbanis are brought for your minor children, they are allowed to eat tzvachim. Minors don't have das. If you need to have das bailim, then imagine you can become a zav when you are a minor. A woman can be a zava when she's a minor. And we don't say that they cannot eat kachim. No. Karbanis can be brought on their behalf. Is a raya that even if when they are adults, the only types of karbanis that you don't need to have das bailim is those that are in the category of mechus lekapara. Great. Now halacha vav. Ezo yizava. We already learned in Bias Asuris a lot of details about midas and zivus. The Rambam was only going to add details that were not mentioned before, just to make that clear. That's why some details will be mentioned and some not. Zu shezav dama shloisha yamim zachazeh, and shloisha yamim, it will be a huge contrast between the zavva and the zav. By a zav, we don't need for the three re'iyos to be on three separate days. If they have three re'iyos, as we'll define in the next chapter, on the same day, that's a bona fide major zav. Shivas Nakiyam and Karbanis. By a woman, even if she flows blood a whole day from the 11 days, it's one day. It's 3 days, which have to be consecutive, and not during the 7 days that are the days of her nidus. And only then does she become a Zav Gedela, for which Aleph, Tzricha, Sviras, Shiva, she has to count Shivas Nakiyam. And then, like we mentioned, not only the mikvah that we're not focusing on right now, But and the next day, on the 8th day, chayavas bekarben. Kvar biyarnu beinyan hanida. Emasai tia isha zava badomim shetira. Ve'emasai loy tia zava. Ella, she'll be anida. Or, like we just mentioned, after birth, 33 days, 66 days, after the week or after the 2 weeks, Ibachal shall be Tahira. Or, according to the biblical law, Chveis Dam Psulim is Tahar V'chulei. We already learned that. And then we also learned about Safek Zava. That was the whole Pischenida. Because for you to know, Vu Halstu in your 7-11 days, there are many scenarios where a doubt comes about. And then it's shaykh for you to see dam for 3 days in a row. But if you don't know whether it's been made nidus or made zivus, then you got to hold out. Okay. Now, kol makim shomanu shizava, v'sifer shiva, then vada. In other words, then the rule is chayavus lavi karbin. And not only does she bring the 2 karbanos, oila and chatas, but since it's a vada, the chatas is eaten. However, that she's a suffix zavam. Again, we're not going into the cheshbainis right now, but everyone remembers. In other words, she sees dam 3 days in a row. If she would have seen dam during the days of nida, she can see dam the whole 7 days. The whole 7 days. As long as she can make a half sektara before the end of the 7th day, we didn't toira, makes a half sektara. She goes to the mikveh that night. But if she doesn't know, am I in my yemei nidus, yemei zivus? Now you have a suffix. What's the beauty, like we mentioned, that the Eibishter was matter to bring a bird, chatos, even our suffix. But ain't an achelos. Hareza maybe a carbon, but the ain't chatos and achelos. Now the oil is never eaten. And by the way, by the oil, you have to speak out. If I'm chayiv, then it's for my chayva. If I'm not chayiv, then I'm making an adova. Well, it's an oil, even by an animal, you can bring an oil for a suffix by making that stipulation. But by a chatos, you can't do that. Now, guys, there are 2 reasons why you can't eat it. One of them I'll mention now, and the Rambam mentioned both. But the Rambam is going to mention another one soon. The one that we'll mention now is that, think about it, Chevra. When you do malika, if it would not be by kachim, it's like cutting the head off. And therefore, the animal is an avela. Speaking about forget about the kachim, the chulin, shech and chulin bifnim. Aside of that, eating the avela is also suffik nevela, suffik deraisa l'chumra. The Rambam spoke that reason by shchita. The Rambam is going to give the other reason. So I'm just speaking this one reason. So you can't eat it. Has to be burnt. Has to be burnt. And by the way, if you remember by Psulei HaMikudashim, how great was that series that Rambam gave? That we Sreifa, and then we learned about Kavura. So what was the klal, my friends? That all Psulei HaMikudashim have to be burnt and not buried. Now, Shom B'Yarnu. Let's give another example of a suffix yoledis now. What's a suffix yoledis? Because a woman becomes tamei as a yoledis, which also means she has to bring karbanos, not only if she gives birth to a viable child, even if she gives birth, God forbid, to a non-living child, but there are certain limits. Remember that? What's the tsuras panov? Right? In Mishnais, hamapelas, kamin, dogim, v'chagavim, shkatzim, v'ramasim. There, she won't have to bring karbanos. Now, there are times that a woman gives birth and you don't know whether it's a type of fetus that's mechayiv karbanis. That's the karbayanu matelo de isha. And when will she have tumas leda? And matelo de tapel the late tamei leda. Now, that's the way it's going to be worded. That means vaday chayiv harezu meviu karben. And therefore, v'chatos and echelos. And every time you say she'ena tamei leida, ena tamei leida doesn't only mean that she doesn't have all of the dinim of tumah. She's not tamei if she didn't see dam. She's not going to have dam toya. It also means she doesn't bring karbanos. Hariz v'tomar carbon. Now halach zayin, he's going to give examples where there's a suffix. So just we're chazeting these dinim. Ha'isha shelo yehuchseka ubara. Just to know how to translate it. It doesn't mean that she didn't know she's pregnant. She was uncertain whether she's pregnant. It was not certain that she's pregnant. First of all, no, she has a doubt. Maybe she was not even pregnant. And then she has a flow of blood, and it was heavier than normal. And she knows that if she was pregnant, she had a miscarriage. But she doesn't know what she miscarried. In Nafil, now what are the rules of a Nafil, guys? Number 1, she needed to be holding that baby for a full 40 days. Number 2, when are you chayiv karban? This is important, guys. You remember, it had a tsuras adam. The main thing is what the face looks like. Or maybe, even if she carried the fetus for 40 days, I mean, she had the miscarriage only on day 41 or further into the pregnancy, but you won't be chayiv on it. hamapelas, kimin, dagim, v'chagavim, shratzim, shkatzim v'ramasim. She b'chlal is not chayiv, and there's no tumas laid over there. So now we have a doubt. Oh, Hadei is a suffix eladis. So what's the beauty again? Whenever there's a suffix, she brings the birds. However, the oil is brought on stipulation, and the chatos, there's no stipulation. You bring the chatos, but ein chatos and achelas. Other examples. Neifel echad, we know, is machayev to bring karbanos. The other neifel is badai ptura. That means when the two women, their fetuses got mixed up together. One of them has surah sadam, one has a surah of a dag. We just don't know who's the mother of which. So if you remember, Machlokes Chachamim and Rabbi Yosi, you know what Rabbi Yosi says? Machaya, both of them together by the two birds, both of them, and that chatos is coming vadai for a neifel that's machaya v'karban. The Elama, they say, if it's mine, it's mine. If it's yours, it's yours. The Chachamim argue with that. No, every woman has to bring the karbanos, and every woman's karbanos is misafik. Kol achas mishtei mevi karban misafik, and therefore, since we pass like the Chachamim, it's not one set from both women, but every woman has to bring the two birds. Then chatas achas mishtei mechelas, because each woman has a suffix, whether she was the mother of the tzura sadam. Shechatas ha'oif haba ala suffix nisrefes. The Rambam is going to write the second reason, the other one we just mentioned Balpeh before, Shema ein chayev, because if she's not chayev, then you can't bring a chatos as an adava. So then it chaps that it's chulin, and chulin that's slaughtered, then the azor is asur ba'ana. Come on, Shabiana v'chashchita, guys, and that's aside of what the Rambam mentioned already, that there's also suffix nevela, because melika, if it's not kachim, is garnished, is menabel. Halacha ches, achas hayoledes. The achas hamapeles v'lo de echad. Guys, halt up. We just spoke this out in the intro. Or v'lo de harbe. Let's speak about everything is healthy. A woman gives triplets. She's only chayiv to bring one set of karbanos if those babies came within the 40 or within the 80 days. That's a simple klal. Hadei mevi karban echad lekulam. But v'hu sheteleit kulam b'toichim ei milo'ois. But if she was mapel after Yedei Milo'ois, no, with Rambam avade, if she had another baby, avade yechayev. But even it's not shaykh to have another baby during the Milo'ois. Okay, by Nekeva is 80 days. With all of the maybe today technology, I don't know what the record is. Tavshin Pei Gimel pre Mashiach. Even though it's amazing, I think women give birth in week 27. I don't know. You have to find out. Okay, it doesn't matter whether the baby is going to live or not. The point is, when did it leave the mother? If it left within the days of a Milo'ois, she doesn't bring another set of karbanis. If she gave birth to a living or a not living after Milo'ois, then she brings afala shading. And even if the second was a hapala. Okay, so Yol, then a keva, then kol hanafalim, shetapol, miyem alei datzvek, yem shmainim, they are nechshavim im havala tanisha. And guys, you remember this? Uchilu yoldu to'inim zachazeh. And like we mentioned, when a woman gives birth to twins, to triplets, who was the Arab? Bismanenu, 8 babies a couple of years ago. Not a Yiddish woman. Huh? The Aktomam. One set of karbanis. You got a deal. The Eina Mevia Ela Karbanecha. Now here's Gavaldik. How do you view the end of Milo'ois? So Machlokes B'Shamim B'Silo. Guys, karbanis can only be brought during the day. When could you bring the karbanis? On day 81. What happens if a woman, after the birth of an akeva, on the night going into 81, not the day of 81, she was mapo. So do we say it's still in the days of Milo'ois because she was not allowed to bring the karbanis at night? We don't paskin that way. The Rambam paskins like Bisilo, which is generally the way we paskin, and that is that you cannot bring it on the night going into it. That's a technical thing. You finish the Milo'ois. Alama kachim can only be brought during the day, and therefore, since you left the days of Milo'ois, ki pila neifel b'leil echad u'shmoinim, and vadai for sure u'meyoyim echad u'shmoinim b'hala. Then, if what this woman miscarried had a tzura sadam, in other words, it's machayev a carbon, im hayroel a carbon, then she has to bring another set of a carbon al yada give valdik. That is with the all of rei atzmai. Another din, Yod in a keva. So now we're going to go into another detail. Listen to this. She gave birth to an keva. Before the 80 days were over, the Rambam just gives an example of 60 or 70 days. You know what? You know why we want 60 days? Why 60 days? Because the couple cannot be together for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And then after they were together, you need to have at least her carrying the child for 40 days, a full 40 days, for it to be shayach, to bring about the din of a yoledes and the din of a carbon. So it's 60, 70 days, he peel in a keva shniyah. So first of all, not only does she not have to bring a carbon for the second, because it's within the Mala'is, what happens if it was developed enough that you can see the gender was female? Maybe today you can rely on technology, you know it's a female. What happens if after the second, within the 80 days, she gave birth to a third? She's only going to be chayiv one carbon at the end, even though the third was after the 80 days of the first. So he says, Kol nefel shetapel b'toich shmenim shel nekei bezu ashniya will be petura. And this goes on ad infinitum. Point is, Yechap, is that third child was after the 80 days of the first. It's each one, it's like a chain. Each one is linked to the one prior. Each one is exempted with the carbon prior. At the end of the day, you have one carbon. Because it's within the Malois of the Sheni. The Sheni is Chashiv and Manishain, right? Because it was within the Malois of the Nishain. The Einam of the Elo carbon Echad Alakoil. Wow. Halacha 9. Hayeledas Tumtum Ayandragenes. Point is, you don't know male or female, now you have a suffix. Now look what's the sfekas. And now the Pila Nefel Achar Arboim. But before day 81. Right? Within the 80 days. Now, you don't know. If the tumtum was in a keva, then you'll be potter. If the tumtum was a zachar, you'll be chayiv. Simple. And like that's the whole gewaldigkeit, that you bring a bird chatos ala safik. Shema zachar uarishin v'reipila achar melois. However, since it's a doubt, the ein chatos on echelos, because shem in a keva yerishayna. And therefore, if the first one, right, if the tumtum was in a keva, so therefore, chap that umatoich melois epila, she petura. Now, listen to this. Now that we introduced this concept that you bring a bird carbon al suffix, what happens if a woman has 5 doubts? Do you bring 5 such sets? No, you don't. Halacha yud. Suffix chamesh. Ladies, the word 5 is just a muscle. In other words, not during 5 different times of her life. For whatever reason, she never yet went to the Beis Hamikdash to bring the korbanos. She gave birth. She miscarried. She miscarried for sure after day 40. But Suras Adam, Suras Chaya, you don't know what it looked like. It happened 5 separate times. Or a woman, Safik Chamesh Zivos. 5 times in her life, she underwent this time that she had done 3 days or more consecutively. She had a doubt. She lost her Pesach Nida. She didn't know whether it was in the days of Nida, the days of Zava. So, as we paskened before, for every suffix, you also have to bring the karbanos of a Zava, but it happened 5 different times. Mevia carbon echad. She only brings 1 set. Carbon echad always means the 2, right? By your letters. Or by the Zava. By the Zava, it's always birds. Even by your letters, we'll always speak about birds, just to make it simple. And Vaychelas Basvachim. I'll tell you why. Remember the Gemara? You know what a carbon is like? A carbon is like going to the mikvah. Guys, even though we said mechusei kapara, just to appreciate that, Rambam began this chapter by wording that the carbon of the chatos brings tahara. Now, let me ask you a question. If a person 5 different times in his or her life became tamei meis, separate times, they just never purified themselves. They don't have to go to the mikvah 5 times. They don't have to have the whole procedure 5 times. It's from the kapara part, you can argue you're takachayev. Karbonis. But from the Tara part, whenever you had contact with Tuma, and then you had another contact with Tuma, only 1 set of Tara is needed. And don't forget, my friends, that bringing a Chatos Besafik is problematic. We only allow it Bekushi because you're stuck. If you're not going to bring it, you can never eat kachim. Since 1 is enough to be mater, the Karbonis, then you won't be allowed to bring the other ones. That's the logic. Maybe lois, you're not even chayiv to bring. Not even chayiv. That she's chayiv to bring another one. There's no suffix there. Whenever you're chayiv, you're chayiv. You were speaking about a suffix. That's what. Remember the words is that suffix be kushi hitiro. By the way, the heter is not from the Chachamim, it's from the Torah. But we view it as like there's no option. Here the Yaakov for you. But if she had chamish leidos vadois or and chamish leidos vadois, then even there, by the way, even over there, means even when you're vadei chayiv, as far as the tara is concerned, once you bring one set, you can eat zvachim, and the other ones you're mechuyev to bring. Now you understand the rationale. Oh, we're only matter suffix to be matter you to eat. Since even by vadai, if you have 5 sets, after the first chatas, not even both, you can already eat. So when there's a doubt, you no longer can do it. Beautiful. And now let's put everything together. She had 5 leidos vadois and 5 leidos suffix. You know what you do? Here you have to bring all of the karbanos for the vadai, right? And so let's go. 1 for the vadai, alavadi v'nechol. All the other vadois, like we mentioned, is a chayva. The echad ala safek. 1 for all of the 5 ve'ena nechol. The eina sharoleh chayva at all. And after she brings and v'oichelas bizvachim.
Why the 2?
I don't know, Danny, if v'oichelas bizvachim means after both. I don't know if that means that. I think v'oichelas bizvachim means even only after 1. It just means that she cannot use the vada. No, it has to mean both. It has to mean both. I don't know why. In other words, why can't, if the vada would have been matter of the suffix, then she would not even be allowed to bring 1 suffix.
Right.
But we don't say that, so I don't know why. Well, okay, halacha yudal. Ha'isha shenis gaidom. The ein yadua im achelin is gaida yolda im mishin is gaida yolda. Who remembers how is that possible? Guys, how is it possible for a woman to undergo a conversion and she doesn't know when her baby was born? What does a woman have to do? She has to go to the mikvah. How can she not know?
She didn't wait 3 months.
So like this. First of all, we learned that when there is a mizbeach standing, when a mizbeach is standing, you are only a bona fide full Jew or Jewess when the karbanis of a gear is brought and a shliach brought. Or another example, we learned something about it, that it could be speaking about a woman that's a slave. A shifchach kenana is that did a tvilu l'shem abdus. When she gets her document of emancipation, she becomes a bona fide Jewish woman. She becomes a bona fide Jew. It makes her a Jew, and you don't have to give it to her hand. The whole concept of gita v'yada, gita shtar shichrud v'chatzeira boim ka'achas. There are certain scenarios where Shitaka won't know. Then harezu mevia korban misafek, and again the ein chatos and echalos. Kvar b'yana milchashkogoy shkol mechus lekapara misafek she'over alam yom ha'kipurim. Chayovim lo v'yachayom ha'kipurim. Shekorban ze machshiram lechol b'kotchen. That's the key. It's mamash ironic. We're calling it mechusrei kapara, guys. If this korban would be kapara, you know what happens? Yom Kippur itself is mechaper. Since it's not only kapara, it's connected to tahara. Yom Kippur doesn't bring you tahara. Halacha yud beis. Ha'isha sheyesh alel leidam oiziva. So the din is, she puts the money in. There were 13 shofars in the Beis Hamikdash. One of them was designated, right, for these bird karbanis. She doesn't have to see them being brought. Why? And they're going to be makriv connect on kinim, as we learned in Shkolim and in Nechos Klei Hamikdash, which is really great. Now, if a woman wants to witness her karbanis being brought, that's a different thing. Then she would give the birds to a kohen. And by the way, the whole thing with Pinchas and Eli, remember the 2 sons, Pinchas and Chafni, Bnei Eli, that they committed adultery with a married woman. The Gemara says it means that they did not bring the karbanos right away. Those were the women that didn't put it in the box. They gave it to the kohen. So since they were not careful, let them wait until tomorrow. That was a terrible sin. Halacha Yud Gimel, final halacha, Isha Sheviya Chatasa. Umesa. Guys, if a woman brings a carbon oil and she dies, what's the din? Remember the din? No chatos is ever brought la'achamis. Right? And chatos, she didn't even designate it. But here, if she brought her chatos and then she died, the heirs have to take money from her estate and bring an oil. And Shiva is a din Toirohu, which is why it trumps the din Yerusha. Again, and not in the other direction. And today's third chapter, which will be the chapter about Zav, which is really quite simple. The Rambam is going to define like what makes the seminal omission of a Zav be classified as Zav versus another type of semen that's classified and brings about the person a din of Tumas Balkeri. All the pratim about Zav Shtei De'iyos, Zav of Shalish De'iyos, and because of the need of having 3 De'iyos, and like we mentioned, it can be all on the same day. The two can be on the same day. But if you had one long De'iyah, but it went from one day to the next, the Yomim are Machalkim. Yomim separated. So therefore, we're going to have a discussion about Bein Hashmashos, and we'll see in this chapter the 3 ways halachically of viewing Bein Hashmashos and the doubt, the halachic doubt. There's certain areas in halacha that we don't come to a conclusion. And because of that, there are consequences. Since it could be A, it could be B, it could be C, and whenever we're speaking about generally a din Torah, you're going to have to be machmer, how that will affect. Here, the din of a Zav, Perek Beis has 14 halachas. Halacha Aleph. Hazoiv. Zoiv is a discharge of Zera. Hazoiv Omer Batoira. Chaveh, this is Parshas Mitzoira. So aside of the Tara of the Mitzoira, Mitzoira's Tara, Tazriya is the Tumah. After that, if you remember, there's so much regarding other Tumais. And the Torah begins over there, Ish, Ki Yeh Zav. Remember the words, Mi Besoroi. Zoivoi Tamehu. That's how the Parsha of Zivus begins in Vayikra Tez Vav. So here we go. What is it? It's not your normal Zera. He Shechva, that's Nida Daf. Who remembers, I think Daf Lamed, the Torah there is this, the Gemara is describing, it's not only that it didn't leave the body without a kisha, without an erection, that the Zera is different. It's a sickly Zera. Shechva Zera. Haba Mechoili Achalolim. It comes from a internal. Halala means a internal sickness. Shemis kabetzas bahem, that affects the organs of the body in which semen collects. Now, since it's coming out mechoili, hazoiv, these are the samana. Number one, eino yoitzi bekoishi. Doesn't come out when the man is erect, like zera leaves the body. Number two, the ein biyitzi yosei kaive v'lehano. Right? Elo nigrar. It's drawn out. Meaning its consistency is very thin. The zera is very drawn out, and the yoitze kemay batzik shalso. And when you make a dough out of barley without even applying pressure to the barley, try that. There's going to be a liquid that's going to come to the top. Without that's and it's going to have the same type of consistency like the mei soidim. Okay, doya means it's dim. It's not bright white. Kaloiv beitza, that's not fertilized. In contrast, aval shechazera is first of all lavanik shura. It's adhesive, like the white of an egg that is, yes, fertilized. Halacha beis. Now, so first we establish was is das zoif or zav. Now we know it's a type of discharge that's sickly. Now, if he had this type of semen, but why did it get discharged? Because the person had a cause that wasn't stomach went out. We're going to define that's the shiva b'shiva drachim. Right? People who learn kedusha in the beginning, they have to muchazach with that. In other words, if there's any external cause for this person to have this type of re'iyah, we won't count it in the 2 or the 3. Machmas chayli or oines chayetz. We'll define this better in a moment. Einazav shenemar ki yazav mi besarai. So Chazal understand that to mean machmas besarai yatami. No, there's no other reason. V'loy machmas davarach. Mekan homru b'shiva drachim beit kemesazav, which is that if a person eats too much, it can cause their body to have this zivus emission. And then by the way, zivus emission will always be metama the person like a balkari, but it won't include it in the dinim of zav. or drinking too much, or carrying something, or jumping, or an illness, or bemara. Over here it means when a person saw some sexual activity, or if a person just thought about it. That's called machmas davarach. Ketzad, we already learned techilagasas when you're full, don't eat. If you eat after you're full, it's disgusting and it's unhealthy and it can cause the body to give off this zivus. You're drinking too much. Or if you had foods, like we learned at Yom Kippur, for example, eggs, garlic, the foods that you can't eat at Yom Kippur. You did a lot of extraneous exercise. You jumped around too much. It's you jumping, or something jumping on you. You're getting a knack on your back. If a person was ill, if a person saw a specific woman, and he thought about her, or he was hitter be'iske be'ilam. So if prior to the zivus emission, one of these 7 things happened, now how much prior we'll see in a moment, and then they have the Sriyah Shel Zoy, then we say, no, it's not zivus. So let's go. If a person had a normal semel emission, within the next 24 hours, even if they have a zivus emission, it's called machmas davarach. It was like a residue from the zera. We say machmas. And this 24-hour period is also if a person had a mara, if he saw some sexual activity, or if he thought about sexual activity, then we say from the Shiva Dracham, Lamaichel, Lamishta, Lamaiso, Lakvitza, then only toilin when the person is still under the tsa'ar of this activity. Halachi Gimel. Now we're going to see one of the few areas how the Torah is balabas over nature. Right? Lokel goymer oloi. I know that the mashal that Chassidus always gives is that, if a woman had to be a koydem 3 years old, her psulim grow back. So if God forbid someone had a be'iyah with a girl right prior to 3, if the Beis Din will decide to make the year an Ibur year, then her psulim will grow back. Here you have another mashal. It's not brought that much in Chassidus, but the other mashal will be this. Mishamal. We're going to get to a get in a moment. Person made a bris milah, and then they saw Zoif. Ben goy ben Yisrael. Toilin lebamila. Calls man shemitztai. Goy shera keri v'nis gayen. What did we learn in Halacha Gimel? That after having a keri for the next 24 hours, whatever leaves your body is not Zov, not by a convert. Because the Halacha says, Gershon is gayen, kekon shenoilot. Mitama mesiva miyad. Ve'ein toilin me'eis leis. How great is that? In other words, the Halacha of a Gershon is gayen disconnects him from the Zera. Cotton ain't toilin loy b'marav lebehirur. Because she'ein la cotton marav behirur. Obviously, katanim are tmeim. Tuma has nothing to do with das, but therefore, when we say b'shiva derachim beit kemes azov, it only means to an adult, and therefore the last 2 was b'mara ubehirur. So when it comes to a minor, it's only b'chamisha derachim b'ubad. Halacheh. We do that. Not marahirur, but the other 5 we do. Listen to this. So if you're yoinik me'imoi, then we say that if the mother was ill, it could have caused the minor to have the zivus emission, which doesn't count halachically, or should sarech le'imoi. How great is that? How great is that? In other words, contagion in Torah, which was something that was not done. But since he needs his mother, means that when after he goes to the bathroom, he needs his mother to wipe him. So since there's such close proximity, if he has a zivus emission, we can say the mother was ill. And because they were so close, the mother's illness, he caught it from the mother, even though he's not externally ill. We are familiar with these things. And therefore he's not azov. He's not sick, his mother was sick. Now, you have to hold your head on. There's so many nuances. It's only b'ri'iyah sheniya shel zoid sheba ya'aseh zoid k'may she'yisbaer avol ri'iyah rishoyna afil ra'oiseh ba'oines. As long as the second one wasn't caused from an external factor, the second one combines with the first. And you know what that means, my friends? You need to have shiras nekiyim. That means you have to go b'mayim chayim. So you can argue, There's never a need to be boidik under the Iyah Rishayna. It's not true. Because to become a Zava Gedoyla, you have to have the first two, loy machmas davar acher. Afa pikein boit kinois and b'rishayna, kedei limnois ba sholosh re'iyos l'chayvay b'karben. You only chayv karben if the first two re'iyos was only machmas b'sari. Gavaldik. And the Iyah Shlishis never needs bedika. Because afilo ra oisa machmas oines, hoyel b'niskak latuma. Meaning, what happened prior was machmas b'sarai. Great. So, guys, the first one was machmas oinois, and the second one is machmas b'sarai. You're minors of. For you to become a zav gedoyla, the first two have to be machmas b'sarai. But even by a zav gedoyla, the third one can be machmas oinois. Halacha vav roi riyah achashol zoy. Even if it was machmas psari, you don't become a zav after the first time. You have a din of a balkeri. Only a rosh tayim, as we described in halacha hey, then harez a zav, and v'tzarech svira shiva, you have to count 7 clean days, and ubias mayim, not mikvah is not enough here. You have to have mayim chayim, which means a mayon, but chayiv carbon. When does a zav have to bring carbon? Is the mechusre kapara is called a major zav. Rosh Shalish Re'iyah is then, and only then he sees, Zav Gomor, not a major. Major minus by the woman. Zav Gomor, now V'chayv B'karben. Now V'ein Bein Zav Shorosh Tei Re'iyahs. L'Rosh Shalish, Elo Karben Bulvan. They'll have the same halachic status. They have to go to the same Ma'im Chayim. The difference will be one, Karbanos. Mechusri Kapara. Udvaram Elu, Kulam, all of these nuanced details is Divrei Kabbalah. Mipi Moshe Rabbeinu, who heard it from the Almighty God in Sinai. Halacha zayin. Echad haroyesh shtei ha're'iyos oy shalish. Whether it happened all in 1 hour or one after the other, oy achar zu, as we'll see soon, as long as they were within 3 days, oy shara re'iyah. Chol yoim ze achar ze, again 3 days one after the other. Harei zizav. The Torah speaks about days. Yeah, but that's only by the female, by the Zava. Exclusively. As it says, and Taka, if a woman will have many different flows on one of the 11 days, she will not become a Zava Gedoyla. Because there you have to have on 3 separate days. But in contrast, implying only by the female, not by the man. Now, if there's a full 24 hours, then it won't combine. In other words, they have to be consecutive days. It can be all on the same day. It can also be on different days. But if there's a hefsek of a full day, then it's not a zav, not a major zav. Kesad, Rari Shabbos. Now, if this guy only had his next Re'iyah on Monday, that's a great example. Emet Starfus. And by the way, we already learned what's the din. Even if the first Re'iyah was the sickly Zav Re'iyah, and it was not Machmas Oines, Balkeri. When he has another emission on Monday, Vaited al Balkeri, which is the easiest to resolve. Go to the mikvah. And for certain things, you have to wait until the night. Say that. A mikvah, not, you don't need 7 days, you don't need Mayim Chayim. If it ain't a Zav. Guys, the first Re'iyah was on Shabbos, okay? And the second Re'iyah was on Sunday. So what are you right now? Now you are not a Zav Gomer, right? But you don't need to bring Karbonis. And V'ra Re'iyah Shlishis only on Tuesday, not on Monday. And a Chayv Karbon. She'ein Stum Etzarefes L'shtayim. Even though you are already a Zav. Ela Hifsik B'nei Yom Echad. Now, by the way, we're going to have to learn other dinim about what happens to Yeshivas Nakiyim. We're not focusing on that. We want to just establish in this chapter how you become a Zav Gomer to be Chayiv the Mechusrik Yapar. Avlam Ra Achas Hayoim. Achas B'Layla Shala Achrav. Even though Layla Shala Achrav by Yidden is the next calendar day, since it's within 24 hours, Hare Elu Mitztarfais. You got it? The Layla is not Shaykh to the Liyam Shalafana. Right? The night is shaykh to the Liyam Shul. Doesn't matter. It's within the 24 hours. That they are mamish in the same calendar day. Vaday mitztarfos. There was never a full day that separated one from the other. Halacha 9. What's the minimum amount of this emission? No shear. The word hechtim doesn't mean hot. It means it seals the flesh, because when this zera leaves the body, it seals the flesh. Now we're going to learn about the maximum amount. The word nigra means that it leaves. It's very liquidy, and no stimulation is needed, but it doesn't stop flowing. So there will come a point where we're going to say it's considered 2 emissions or 3 emissions. Listen, the amount of time that it takes to go to the mikveh and to dry yourself, even though this Yitzia did not stop, but in other words, there was the time in between, guys, both emissions was not enough time to go to the mikvah to dry yourself. Then it's called 1 re'iyah. The herst. Oh, it was physically, it left and it left. It goes both ways, this man. That's mamish 3 the eos, and now you have to bring a carbon. Wow. You saw 1 the eo, the hifsa, and now you saw another 2.
You know the amount of time that this is.
I don't know, Danny.
Where it actually is.
It says he brings in the bottom. He brings in the bottom here in the Chayenu from a Tosefta, the time that it takes a person to walk 50 amas. Okay, it's 1 and then the other 1 that's like 2, or in the other order. And then and then achas. In all these cases, in all types of variations, we get to the 3. And now we go to the final topic. I want to say it like this, guys. There's something called bein hashmashos. All right, we already established that once it goes, the time it takes to walk 50 yards, which is not a lot of time, it's already considered 2 regardless. So whenever halacha is going to speak about the concept that yomim are machalkim, is even if you had 1 emission, but if it was a little bit in the day, a little bit in the next day, it's considered 2. People right away ask, we learned this. How is that? Well, no. If bein hashmashos is the minimum share today, let's go with the gross, is 13 and a half minutes. You're kidding. It's anyways going to be 2 or 3. It's going to be 3 because of the length of the time. So therefore, don't get nervous. We know about this issue. That's the way that Rambam will introduce bein hashmashos. Let me just speak it out by heart. Bein hashmashos, according to the Rambam, is either day. It's called Safek Yoim, or Safek Laila, or it's Safek Yoim V'Laila. So misafek, it could be that bein hashmashos has a moment of this day and the moment of the next day. So if a person had a re'iyah during bein hashmashos, even if it wasn't the time that it takes to go to the mikvah to dry yourself, since misafek, it could be that 1 drop was on the prior day. But if bein hashmashos has in it both day and night, 1 day and the night is the next day, that's where you have a suffix of 2 re'iyos. That's going to be the whole thing until the end. Let's go nachal. Oh, it was 1 rega. Danny, let's say this man, I'm just giving a guess. Let's say this man is 1 minute. It's probably less.
It's not a walking 50 hours.
No, yeah. Let's say so this guy had an ear for 5 seconds. It was much less. But during a time where it could be, 1 part of it was in the prior halachic day, and the other part was on the other day, because of the rule that watch. And now let's apply this in practicality. That's the key. In other words, you can't say that's vadi going to happen because bein hashmashos takes up time. But if you had the re'iyah during bein hashmashos, and there is a halachic question about bein hashmashos, shuhu safek min hayom umin halayla. I want to make clear what that means. There's really 3 doubts. Either it's day, or it's night, or it's both. And both meaning, the Rambam, there is a day part of bein hashmashos and a night part of bein hashmashos. Could be this 5 seconds don't happen when you were transitioning from one day to the next day. So now you have a Safek Tumah. In other words, maybe the beginning wasn't this day and the ending wasn't the next day. And because of the din of Yomim Mechalkim, at least you have a doubt. Now, Halacha Yud Gimel. Now it's even worse. Why is it worse, Daddy? Because if we're going to say that Ben Hashmoshes is 2, what do you have over here? You have a Sub Gomer. Even if Ben Hashmoshes is 1, so at least you have 2. So 1 by day and 1 Ben Hashmoshes, you're a Zav Vadai. Even if you're going to count the Ben Hashmoshes, then he only has 1, you got 2 now. But you have a suffix l'carbon. And what we keep on learning is that when there's a suffix l'carbon, you bring the carbon. You just don't need the chatas. Or maybe carbon menenach. Halacha Yudalid, all different types of these compilations. Ro'adia achas. Ben Hashmoshes shel Shabbos. Halt kop chevre. So in other words, you're going. You go. One second. No. 1 second. Suffix 2. But then it could be that both of them are Friday. If we're going to say Ben Hashmoshes is day, we're going Friday into Shabbos, and they're both Friday, and the year wasn't very long. If on the tzad that it's Friday, you had 1. If the next one will be on Sunday, you have the full 24 hours in between. You're not even mitzdaref. So if you had one year Ben Hashmoshes going into Shabbos, another one Shomotzoi Shabbos, now you really have 2 doubts. First of all, you might not even be Tomei. You might not be Tomei. Because if the first Ben Hashmoshes, this is all, if Ben Hashmoshes is Yom or Laila, we have to be consistent. But the third doubt of the Rambam is that Ben Hashmoshes has both day and night. So it's possible that the one that you saw Friday into Shabbos was the day. The one that you saw Matzah Shabbos was night. Then you're not even Tomei. Or the other side, Minakotza, you might have to bring a carbon. And then Rambam speaks it up. Sofik latuma, because Shemer Iyar Rishon Hoysu Be'erev Shabbos. And the Shni is B'Metzoy Shabbos. You're not even a sub. You're a Balkeni. Varei Hifsek Shabbos B'nei. The Ein Kanzi was Klal. On the other hand, it's beautiful. In other words, you're going, where do you have a doubt? Minakotza lakotza. Varei Yosofik lekarbon, because maybe one of them was Mitzasa B'Yoyim and Mitzasa B'Layla. So now you already have 2. Shouldn't you say? And now you have the third one. Let's say the third one was Sunday. I don't even care. The third one can be on Shabbos. It can be on the same day. And therefore, maybe carbon ve'eino nechol, gewaldig, mazel tov, to be continued.